Hi there, I'm Crystal from livingwithgastroparesis.com, and I have had gastroparesis now for 20 years. So, in this video, I'm going to give you a little update, tell you what life looks like 20 years after a gastroparesis diagnosis, and let you in on what's coming next for me. So, stay tuned, I'll tell you all about it. Okay, so I was diagnosed with idiopathic gastroparesis in 2004. I was 23 years old. It is now 2024, and I just turned 43 years old. So I have had gastroparesis for the last 20 years. And if you've been around for a while, you know that in those 20 years, my experience with the condition has been all over the place, from being completely debilitated, malnourished, underweight, on all of the medications. I had a gastric nerve stimulator implanted, multiple Botox injections, to a period of time, a couple of years actually, where my gastric emptying normalized and my symptoms mostly went away. And I was eating a pretty normal diet and feeling really good to where I am now, which I would say I'm very much living well with gastroparesis. I do have a demonstrated delay in gastric emptying again. I do have a lot of the symptoms of gastroparesis, again, primarily early fullness, bloating, some stomach pain. Reflux is my main symptom these days, which was actually my main symptom in the beginning when I was first diagnosed. Um, my neurostimulator is not currently turned on. I don't currently take any medication for the gastroparesis, but I do follow a comprehensive management plan in terms of I eat a pretty much gastroparesis friendly diet. I don't stick to it, strictly to the letter, but for the most part, I'm eating a low fat, low fiber diet, small meals. I also, a big part of my management plan is physical activity. So I do try to walk 10,000 steps every single day. That seems to really help me. So it's not that I'm not doing anything to manage gastroparesis at this point. But I have to tell you that 20 years after that diagnosis, I truly do feel like I'm living well with gastroparesis. And I just, as I said, had a birthday. And for so many years, birthdays were really hard for me because it meant like another year that I was going into that I still had gastroparesis because I wanted so desperately to get rid of this condition so that I could live my life. Going into this birthday, I just was really so grateful because I truly do feel like I'm living well. And I do have this diagnosis. I have other diagnoses as well. Um, but I very much feel like I am living well with gastroparesis 20 years later. And I don't know that I would have even thought that was a possibility when I was first diagnosed because I was just so scared of what my future was going to look like. And there were a lot of really difficult years, and there were a lot of really difficult um, instances and challenges. And there were times where I just felt really devastated and hopeless. Um, and so I hope that part of what this video does is not say, oh my gosh, it's been 20 years and she still has gastroparesis, but to say, it's been 20 years and I have lived my life with gastroparesis. And as I said, especially over the last 5 years, I think, kind of specifically, my life has opened up in a way that, as I said, I don't know I would have imagined possible. Well, I still had this diagnosis and I still had these symptoms and I was still managing this condition. And for me, a lot of that just came from really starting to understand that, you know, my experience is not dictated by my circumstances. And this is what I have talked about over the last few years in my videos and on my blogs. Um, but I really want to share that 20 years in, I do feel like I'm thriving with gastroparesis. And I created a new online program at the end of last year called Thriving with Gastroparesis. And because, for me, it went from living with gastroparesis, that was kind of the first iteration of what I shared. And when I first became a health coach, helping people manage their gastroparesis, it was all about living with gastroparesis. And then I wanted more than that. I wanted to live well with gastroparesis. And so, with the comprehensive management plan and figuring out how to improve quality of life and not just symptom management, my focus became living well with gastroparesis. And, of late, it's really kind of become thriving with gastroparesis and living a full, engaged, fulfilling life with the condition, because I don't know how to get rid of it. I wish I did for you and for me. We do the absolute best we can, right, with the tools that we have to manage our symptoms, and of course if there are underlying conditions, to address those. But in general, we don't have as much control over our circumstances sometimes as we wish that we did. But seeing that our experience is created thought to thought in the moment, and it is so dynamic and it is always changing. It's just changed everything for me in terms of living with this condition. And so if that idea doesn't make any sense to you, I will link in the video description where I have talked about this more in depth and explored this a little bit more, if that's something you're interested in. But so that's what life looks like for me 20 years into a gastroparesis diagnosis. And honestly, so I have personally had gastroparesis for 20 years. I started my blog at livingwithgastroparesis.com in 2009. So that's been 15 years. I started coaching other people in 2010. And so it's been almost all of my adult life that I have been really focused on gastroparesis, initially personally and then professionally. And I have been feeling more and more lately the call to kind of expand my focus and to allow myself and my life to kind of fill beyond gastroparesis. And I'm actually hosting a new podcast, which I'm excited to share with you. It is called Living Well When You Don't Feel Well. So it's not specific to gastroparesis, but it absolutely is right in line with everything we talk about here on this channel when it comes to living well. And so it's, conversations about thriving with chronic illness and uncovering our wellness within. And so it is not out yet, but when it is released, I'll put the first episode here on this channel so that you can check it out and hopefully follow along. I will put a link to subscribe in the show notes, but just in general, I'm kind of feeling this urge to expand, um, my life a little bit after 20 years really focused on gastroparesis. And honestly, it's the same thing that I would hope for you. And in the first episode of Living Well When You Don't Feel Well, I talked about the idea that so often when we get a diagnosis and we really are focused on figuring it out, right? Whether that means figuring out how to feel better or figuring out how to get rid of the condition, depending on, I think, where you are in your journey. Um, Oftentimes, we kind of crowd out the rest of our lives with a focus on our health, right? Whether that's a focus on the condition itself, or it's a focus on symptom management tools, or a comprehensive management plan, or watching, people on social media, following social media accounts. And it's almost like we crowd out everything else in our lives because we're just bringing in so much around our diagnosis, around gastroparesis, that our world starts to feel really small. And it does start to feel like our whole life is living with this condition, managing this condition. And so, just as for you, I would want you to broaden your focus and allow yourself to bring back in things that you love beyond managing gastroparesis. um, I'm kind of allowing myself to do the same professionally. I've been doing that personally for a very long time. Personally, gastroparesis is a very minimal focus of my life at this point. It's been 20 years. I've obviously coached hundreds of people and written several books on managing gastroparesis. So the actual managing of it is pretty much second nature to me at this point. And aside from that, I don't think much about it, to be completely honest. And I think, part of that is I know how dynamic it is at this point, right? I know when I don't feel well, it's not that is going to last forever, right? If I'm having a bad flare up and my stomach hurts really bad, the thoughts might come, I can't bear this. They honestly, those thoughts don't even really come anymore. But when they did, it would occur to me that, I only have to bear it moment to moment. That just feels so true to me at this point. It's just something I've experienced for the last 20 years. And we can always handle what's occurring in the moment. And where it starts to feel really hard is when we start getting ahead of ourselves and thinking about, I can't handle this an hour from now, a day from now, a year from now, a month from now. When in reality, first of all, like I said, life happens moment to moment. You can only handle it in this moment. You only ever have to handle it in this moment and experience in this moment. And you have no idea what life is going to look like in a year, a month, even a day, really. We think we do. Our brain will kind of extrapolate and give you its best guess. But my progression with gastroparesis, my experience with gastroparesis over the last 20 years, like I could not have possibly known what that was going to look like. And so, yeah, I mean, personally, it's not a huge focus of my life. But professionally now, I I want to just broaden and, like I said, um, bring in more, right? So, Living Well When You Don't Feel Well, my new podcast with a co host, Samantha Cook, who also has gastroparesis. She has been on this channel. You can find, I think, 2 videos that I've done with her before. And we are talking about just thriving with chronic illness in general. We're not going to be talking about specifics in terms of managing gastroparesis. It's really going to be about just like living well. And the things that I was talking about before that has got me to a place where I really do feel like, I live my life and I have this diagnosis and I do what I need to do to manage, my symptoms and take care of myself. Um, but my life is full and it's fulfilling and it's engaging. And so that's really, what we're going to be focusing on, regardless of your diagnosis. Like I said, I have multiple diagnoses, regardless of physical health, mental health. There is so much more freedom, ease, peace available to us. And so that's what our podcast is about. We're going to have guests come on, other coaches to talk about specific topics related to, living with chronic illness, parenting in the context of chronic illness, romantic relationships in the context of chronic illness, dealing with other people's comments. Our first episode is on how do we even talk about health and illness, and what does it mean to want to be healthy? So there's so many interesting and I think really empowering conversations coming. So if that's interesting to you, like I said, I'll put a link in the show notes that you can subscribe. But so I don't know how many more videos I'm going to be making about gastroparesis. I'm not closing down the channel. I'm not closing down my blog. Everything I've ever created in the last 15 years, pretty much, if I still think it's relevant and helpful, it still exists and is available to you. My quick start guide to gastroparesis management, totally free. It's like a 40-page, I think, ebook. You can download that at livingwithgastroparesis.com. So everything, the books, the program, it's all still there. It's all still available. Um, I don't know how many more videos I'll create here about gastroparesis specifically. Um, I may, I don't know. I am just allowing myself to um, broaden my focus, as I said, and as I encourage you to do. And so I hope that if you hear something in that, if you hear something in the idea that, we tend to crowd out the rest of our lives with, focusing on various things related to our health, maybe that, gives you a little nudge to just kind of start bringing those things back in, maybe broadening your own focus a little bit, and considering, can I live well with gastroparesis? Because I will tell you, 20 years after my gastroparesis diagnosis, 20 years into this, I will say absolutely yes, you can. And over the last 20 years, I mean, I've gotten, this is the internet. This is social media. I've been posting here for a long time. I've gotten my fair share of comments, um, you know, some pretty ugly, some just like genuinely asking, like, do you actually have gastroparesis? I think some people think like I must not actually have gastroparesis if I can say like you can live well with this condition. I do. I've had, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 gastric emptying studies over the years. like I said, have gastric nerve stimulator implanted. I was very sick for, a lot of years. I spent many years at the Mayo Clinic. Um, and I think like right now, without the understanding that I, um, kind of have about our experience, and just knowing the way my experience of gastroparesis has changed in the last 6, 7 years, especially in the last probably 5 years, I think that I would feel worse right now without that understanding. I think that life would feel harder. I think that I would be more focused on managing the condition like I used to be. I mean, it was, literally my job, right? Because I was a coach and an author and a content creator around managing gastroparesis, but also, you know, it was also kind of just like my full-time job managing my condition. And I think without the understanding of kind of where our experience is coming from, and understanding the thinking that I had around that, which is everything we basically talk about in Living Well When You Don't Feel Well, the podcast. Um, I think right now I would be in a different place, and I think I would be having a different experience. And so um, I don't know. I don't ever really address the comments that come, but since I'm doing a 20-year update saying I have had gastroparesis for 20 years, I guess I'll be explicit. I have had gastroparesis for 20 years, except for the couple years where my gastric emptying normalized. I don't know why. But I had 2 normal gastric emptying tests in those times. I have since had 2 abnormal gastric emptying tests again. So, I don't know. I do have gastroparesis. Um, it has at times been very severe. It has at times been debilitating, and it's not now. And that's just my personal experience. And I guess I want to say, um, I'm not discounting anyone else's experience. And that is something that I think some of the comments are probably coming from a place of feeling that I'm saying everybody should feel like I feel about living with this condition, and that's not at all what I'm saying. I have, for the kind of mean and negative comments that I've received exponentially more positive comments thanking me for providing people with an example of what it is to live well with gastroparesis, for actually saying you can live well with gastroparesis, for showing how I live my life with a gastroparesis diagnosis, and talking about initially, yeah, talking about managing the symptoms when that's what I knew how to do, and then talking about living well when it became clear to me like we can do more than just manage these symptoms. We can improve our quality of life, and then talking about what I have seen and come to understand over the last, 6, 7 years, about where our experience comes from and how that completely changed my own experience. And so, you know, I don't bring up the comments to say like, oh, you know, make me feel better. I just want to be really clear that I've had this condition for 20 years. I have suffered with this condition at times. And I am also now living well with gastroparesis 20 years later. So if you have just been diagnosed, please know that the experience you are having right now, that is not indicative of what your future with gastroparesis is going to look like. And if you've had gastroparesis for 5 years, for 10 years, I mean, my experience now is night and day from when I had gastroparesis for 10 years. And so I just want to say that no matter where you are in your experience with gastroparesis, your future is really open, right? There's so many possibilities, and living well, thriving is absolutely among those possibilities. And I've always just wanted to be kind of a light in the darkness of what I consider to be, the online landscape of chronic illness in general. But I think gastroparesis in particular, it's really full of kind of scary stories, and it's very much skewed toward one side of the spectrum of experience. And I think a lot of what's out there is not empowering. It's ultimately not particularly helpful. And I've always just wanted to create a space to create content for those people who are looking for something different, who are looking to be uplifted and empowered and educated and inspired. And so hopefully that is what this update does. Hopefully that's what all of my content does. I hope that you find it helpful on your own journey toward living with gastroparesis, living well with gastroparesis, thriving with gastroparesis. And if you want to continue to follow along with me regularly, definitely subscribe to Living Well When You Don't Feel Well, because you will be hearing from me weekly on that podcast. And otherwise, I don't know, I'll be posting here on YouTube if and when it occurs to me. But otherwise, I'm sending you so much love, so many good wishes. And until next time, take care.